This is the Inquisitive Minds Podcast.
Hey, thanks for tuning into the Inquisitive Minds Podcast. Today we have a very special guest. We have the gentleman from One Candle Society over here today to talk about shadow people. Give it up for Vic Waitley and Marcus D.
Hello.
Welcome to the podcast, guys.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, we were super excited that you wanted to have us on, man. I've been impressed with your stuff since the start. I'm like, I want to go on this guy's podcast because you can tell your stuff. Because from day one, you were doing some impressive stuff covering Roswell. You know, because again, we're both comedians, and I was like, so your thing popped up on my feed. You were starting this podcast, and that your very first topic was Roswell. I'm like, that's impressive. And I'm watching it, and the content that you're talking about, and all the stuff, and your stuff. So I was super impressed.
Damn, we've been talking for 5 years, and we haven't even got around to Bigfoot.
Right on. I had a Bigfoot expert on, and I actually have two more upcoming experts coming on for Bigfoot. They seem to be drawn to me, the cryptid community.
It's a good community, man.
Before we start off talking about shadow people, you guys want to tell us a little more about your YouTube channel, and then you've recently branched out to a new podcast?
Absolutely, yes. So it was about 5 years ago. We started. We'd been a paranormal investigative group for a while prior to that, and one day I came to Vic and I said, we could actually do a YouTube channel. So we started a YouTube channel where we cover topics over ghosts, strange entities, bizarre phenomenon, cryptids, UFOs, conspiracy theories, all the fun stuff in the paranormal. And we've been doing that for about 5 years. We love it because, we talk about a little bit of everything on our channel. And then I think it was last either October or November, we decided, because people forever have been saying our stuff sounds like a podcast, we should start a podcast. Then we finally decided to launch our podcast, Talking with Shadows. And
you said it's called Talking with Shadows?
Yes, yeah. We call it the conversations everyone has, but nobody wants to admit to. Because when we first got into this, we were worried that about the repercussions for our careers, and that people thought we were going to be crazy. But the more that we were talking to people, the more they found out about our stuff. We found out that almost everybody has some sort of paranormal experience, some sort of encounter, something they can't explain, but they just don't tell everybody else because they're afraid everybody's going to think they're crazy.
That's been my experience too. Since I've started this, I've had so many people talk to me in private and tell me a ghost story or a story about seeing something crazy, and then they always swallow it with, "You're the only person I've ever told that to."
As you know, we work in mental health.
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
We had a lot of those stories for through work too. So.
All right, so we're talking about shadow people today. Do you guys would just want to dive right into that with a start of just what are shadow people?
A shadow person is an entity that appears like a shadow. They can be moving in a two-dimensional manner or a three-dimensional manner. And sometimes they'll possess extra secondary traits along the lines of hats, veils, or various colored glowing eyes. That's the quick of it, at least.
And not only can they just be shadow people, you could also just see shadow blobs or even shadow animals, which is actually a pretty common phenomenon as well.
I haven't heard of the shadow animals before. That's fascinating.
Oh, absolutely. I had a pretty intense shadow animal encounter. Oh man, it was probably about a year ago. It was pretty intense. We for a while have been doing a lot of research on skinwalkers.
Okay.
Which are Native American shape changers, like werewolves and things like that. You can think that way.
Wendigo type stuff.
And so we got. I was reading this book outside with my dog about skinwalkers, and as I'm reading it, one of the things I'm learning about the lore of skinwalkers is that when you talk about them or when you bring up a conversation, they know you're talking about them.
Oh.
And as I'm legit reading that part of the book with my dog next to me. My dog like stands up like at attention. And in my backyard, a light kind of like shines down, creates like this like circle of light in my backyard, and probably I'm about 3 feet away from it. And as I look over, I see this dog, raccoon, shadow animal, like fully 3D, step into the light, not connected to any other part of the light. So it's not like branching off from the shadows or anything. It's just standing in the middle of the circle of light and locks eyes with my beagle that barks at everything. And they stare at each other for a good 10 minutes.
Oh.
And I'm just sitting there, just in awkward, just silence, like freaked out of this. And then finally just walks away. And then my dog looks at me like freaked out. And then we just like jump back in the house. I turn out the light, and yeah, I call Vic in a panic.
At that point, he calls me, and he's telling me he's locked himself in his basement, that something weird happened. He's panicked. He tells me that he sees this squirrel, dog, something. He never mentions that it's a shadow version of it because he's talking a mile a minute at that point.
Yes, I did.
And I'm just like, I look at Ellie, and she's one of the researchers for a channel, and I just go, I don't know what's going on with Marcus. He apparently saw a squirrel and has locked himself in his basement.
Yeah.
The shadow's a big key to add into that story. You know, a lot of times on a show like this, I just try and ask questions and stay out of the way. But this is actually a topic that's very close to me. I've had multiple experiences with shadow people. My first ever paranormal experience was with a shadow person. I was maybe 5 or 6 years old. And me and my parents were outside, and it was dusk, you know, and there was a big community mailbox that, you know, we lived in apartments that everyone would get their mailbox. As we were standing in front of our building, I just happened to be staring at the mailbox, and I saw this shadow in the shape of a child just walk in front of the mailbox, stand there, and casually walk away. Now, I know that sounds crazy, but there wasn't a boy there. There wasn't anything there. And when I told my parents, obviously, you don't believe a 6-year-old, but that stuck with me for many, many years.
That reminds me a lot of, like, I had a very similar sort of encounter from my first paranormal experience where I'm in kindergarten, so I'm probably around that same age, and I see a static person, and I try to describe what the heck I had seen to my parents, and I just did not have the vocabulary to properly describe it. They just thought I
absolutely. I'm not even sure what a static person is. That's something I'm unfamiliar with.
Oh yeah, it's a lot like, think kind of like a shadow person, but made of like TV static. They behave differently, but like just general just description. Think that.
Where shadow people are fairly common, and if you talk to people, I find that shadow people are one of the most common paranormal experiences. I've only found a few people that have seen static people, and I've been digging into it for a while. Oddly enough, we're in an interview with Knock Once for Yes, and yeah, they're like, oh, what, really? You've had one of those too?
Yeah, that's a rarity. Now, a lot of people have asked me and reached out to me. They said, are shadow people malicious?
Yep.
Always malicious as well, like never come as a light omen or anything like that?
I am going to argue with him on this. I think he comes in two forms. I think there is innocuous, and I think there's malicious. I don't believe that there is benevolent. At least I have never encountered a situation where I thought their motive was benevolent at all. But I think there's ones that you would run into, and they're just doing their thing, and they're not there out like to specifically hurt you. But there are many of them that do act in a benevolent way. Like their modus operandi for specifically like red-eye shadow people is they'll often appear in one's bedroom while you're resting. You wake up and you sense something's wrong. You look around, you're able to pick out the silhouette in the corner of the room where you might notice the two red glowing eyes and find that your body is locked in position. Sleep paralysis, if you're familiar with it.
Yes.
And often they'll just be there menacing you. We've always worked off the theory that they seem to be intentionally trying to evoke negative emotions. We've always seen the assumption that this might be a form of feeding, but I think those are malicious entities when they engage in that sort of act. Because if a person had menaced you like that, like what would you consider their behavior to be?
Yeah, obviously. My most intense paranormal experiences have also been with shadow people. It's funny that you mentioned that because I had a bedroom, I don't know, 9 years ago, maybe, that I was staying in, where I was coming into contact regularly with a shadow person with glowing red eyes. And he didn't physically do anything to me, but it was always a terrifying and evil experience. You know, he was large. I want to say 6.5 to 7 feet. You know, I drew a picture of him one day, and it started with mild sleep paralysis. And this is something I've never talked about publicly, but it moved on to eventually there was an incident where I was kind of like battling to get this to go away, and I astro projected at one point.
That's fascinating. There,
Fascinating.
you wouldn't still have the drawing, would you?
No, I don't. It is I don't. It's, you know, it was a decade ago almost.
Man, I figured it was a long shot, but I'd love to see it.
I could still draw it up because I remember it distinctly. You know, that was a image that doesn't leave you easily. And on top of that, it's not something that you can just talk about willy-nilly because people don't believe you, you know. And I understand that. But once you've seen something or experienced it, you're not going to tell me that I was wrong. So it's just easier not to talk about it. And then I came into contact with shadow people almost that looked like the ghosts or the black entities off the movie Ghost.
Mm-hmm.
They were kind of taunting me at points, and I remember I broke down, you know, just from sheer terror.
Can I ask you
So this is a topic that's very close to me. I'm sorry?
Can I ask you some questions that might bend a little bit on the personal?
Go ahead.
When you were experiencing these persistent shadow person encounters, were you in either a very negative state of your personal life, or were you in a area where there would be a lot of negative emotions being experienced?
Both.
Yeah.
Okay, because we've been working on a theory for a long time. We used to work with a man named Adam Mathers, and he had started this project here in our home city of Evansville of basically putting up a big map and starting to put pins in different areas where shadow people were being sighted, and then overlaid it with commonalities of domestic abuse. And his working theory was that if they're drawn to places with negative emotion, you're going to see the pins popping up in those areas. And sure enough, it matched up quite well. So that's one of the questions I always ask to see if
that made a lot of sense because, you know, I was going through a negative time in my life, in my personal life. I was in even a neighborhood that was negative, but it felt like it fueled me to become more angry. Like there would be times where I would be enraged while being scared out of my life because I'm in a room with a shadow person. And it was difficult for me to understand. I almost felt like it was trying to possess me, but it wasn't strong enough.
Mm-hmm. I found too when one of the jobs that I did prior to working in mental health now was I used to work like in homes, like an in-home social worker, and we're here in Indiana, and you know, Indiana has like one of the largest we're literally the largest producers of methamphetamine like in the world.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
Yeah,
we don't like to brag about it.
Hey, you gotta stay winning on something.
Right, you know, especially in Southern Indiana, actually, like numerous times, like we're like ranked number one. And we found out that one of the things I had to get trained in doing was discovering like evidence of like signs of a meth lab like in the home. Okay, and so like we got educated on what a meth lab looks like and things like that. And they were also talking to us about culture that like methamphetamine users too use. And one of the things that apparently like that meth addicts talk to each other about are seeing shadow people. Like a veteran meth addict will tell a newbie in them that's coming in to start meth, like, you're gonna see the shadow people. Like it's gonna be a thing. They're gonna come. You're gonna see them. You need to expect this. You need to prepare for this. Numerous times when I've got to meet families when methamphetamine was involved, they would be like either like terrified of the shadow people. They would be tearing their house apart, their cars apart because of these things. Like, and it was always weird to me that I'm like, like if you're a person like and a veteran tweaker telling you that you're going to see shadow people with red glowing eyes and hats doesn't deter you from meth. Like
Yeah.
the dare program's got no chance. Like it's like it can't do it. It's got no chance.
So one thing we often wonder
Go ahead.
when it comes to that is this a hallucination commonly associated with meth, or could these entities be drawn to people in this high emotion and at that point partially incapacitated situation?
Yeah, that's something I never heard of before. I would lean towards the latter myself. And you're absolutely correct. Meth is bad enough, but then you're adding shadow people. I might have to reconsider.
Oh yeah.
I've never heard of somebody seeing shadow people from smoking crack, so that's an option.
Oh yeah. Like like you may end up seeing dragons or gestures doing DMT, but you do meth, you're gonna start seeing shadow people. So
The interesting story, and this kind of puts myself out there. I tried LSD recently for the first time. I did it as a thought experiment, not because I necessarily wanted to just party. And it was a mental trip, but I did not hallucinate. I did not see anything out of the ordinary. And honestly, I was highly disappointed. I did it in preparation to hopefully see something that I could try and connect with this episode. Nothing at all. So
maybe try ayahuasca.
Well, you said meth works, so that's a lot easier to get than ayahuasca.
Yeah, but we would not encourage people to try to bring shadow people into their lives. Generally, people that have had encounters with shadow people, on the long term, like for prolonged periods of time, it has been staggeringly negative.
Oh, I agree. It's a term I say in jest, but it was a miserable encounter, and it went on for quite a bit of time, a significant amount of time, and it left me scarred. However, since no one would believe me, it made me face it and deal with it on my own. So now, I'm more welcome to that type of thing. I don't fear it as much. Where do these things manifest themselves from?
I think it's arguable. Like me and Ellie were having a discussion before this, and she had asked me, well, where do you think they come from? And I'm like, to tell you the truth, my best guess would be potentially an alternate dimension, mainly because of the crackling sound that is heard. Because when you hear physicists talk about there being extra dimensions, they'll often talk about the amount of energy that would be required to ever breach it. And a lot of people will report this odd, crackling sound, like the air is supercharged while one is manifesting.
Yeah, ghost hunters report the same thing when in places where ghosts manifest. It's like crackling sound.
Interdimensional beings. I don't know if you said you haven't touched the Bigfoot yet, but that's one of the theories on Bigfoot as well, that he could be an interdimensional being, which is almost one that I subscribe to. It just seems more believable than we haven't found this large animal.
Yeah, when it comes to the Bigfoot stuff, when you look at the bulk of the lore, you start finding it doing some things that don't make sense on a biological level. But going back to your other question, although I'm not sure where they come from, I do have a good idea where they go. They seem to locate around areas that have a saturation of negative emotion. I used to live in a really bad apartment complex, and I'm very prone to going for night walks. And it wouldn't be uncommon for me to see one. I wouldn't see one every night, but if I did spot one, it wasn't real uncommon. When I moved to the neighborhood I currently live in, it's a lot safer of a neighborhood. There's a lot more balance. I haven't seen one in quite a long time.
Now, when you say you used to see them fairly frequently, did you build up a tolerance, or were you just not scared from the beginning? Because honestly, just casually seeing them is a terrifying thought.
Well, the thing is, I was first exposed to the paranormal very early, and I started going out being a paranormal researcher around the time I was 14, and I lived in a isolated, tiny community. So I was going out on my own from a very early age, checking out graveyards and stuff. So I kind of built up a resistance very early on. For the most part, I've never had a really bad shadow person attack. So I don't have that experience as of yet, but usually it would be things along the lines of I would see something move out from behind a tree and move back, and I would take note of that. I'd go over, examine the area, nothing's there. I did see a clear, defined silhouette. And usually the encounters were very short, things along those lines. For me, no, I didn't really ever find them to be terrifying because the ones I ran into never did anything to terrify me. It would just be something that was very peculiar.
I got into the paranormal, I would say, much later. I got into it, I would say, like in my mid-20s.
Okay.
Mostly to understand what Vic was talking about when he would go on these rants about a lot of these things. But so then it's weird when you're in the paranormal. Once you're in the know and you start learning about paranormal stuff, you are now more inclined to start having paranormal experiences, which is what happened to me.
Oh,
So I very quickly started trying to come up with how do you handle these sorts of things. And one of the things that I discovered was when you look like cross culturally to like different cultures and stuff, every culture has different methods for dealing with these things. They all say they work. The only thing they have in common is they believe that they work. They have a confidence similar to when you talk about rage. Rage and anger generally being secondary emotions. There's usually some confidence that there's some energy that's behind this. So when you feel like you are in a safer place and you're going to be okay and it's genuine, it seems like those experiences start shifting from like the real malevolent to bad to like kind of benign to
okay.
not having them.
One of the most common questions I've gotten, and it's just more on the where do they come from, it's people wanted to know, did it have a religious connection at all? Because we think of evil. Normally, as a Christian, you think of devil, Satan, demons, all that. Is there anything going on with them like that?
Well, there's jinn. They're sort of described that way.
Yeah. So what happens a lot for people in the paranormal is, as we grow up, we sort of get this vocabulary, like this like paranormal vocabulary that we're accustomed to dealing with. And I think when people try to explain the paranormal, the only thing they have is the vocabulary from the background from where they come from.
That makes a lot of sense.
That's why you get people, from the Middle East calling them jinn, Christians calling them demons, people from a more animistic background calling them spirits. You get that. You get that sort of thing.
So almost our lack of knowledge names them.
But if you want some specific references, in American Indian mythology, for many of them, it would be just the description of a sickness spirit, where these shadows enter the body to cause a sickness, and then there's like many stories where then a spirit brings a special fire, and the fire casts out the spirits from the body, and then the person gets better. There's references to very similar spirits in Taoist mythology, which is a form of animism, and they were just like a form of dark spirit to kind of distract you from your path. And there are like the jinn are described that way. And there's also sometimes the others from Arab mythology will be described as a form of walking shadow as well.
And you said that was called the others?
Yeah, it's kind of.
And that's from Arab mythology?
Yeah.
I'm going to write that down because I haven't heard that one before, and I'd like to look into that.
I first heard about it. I had a Moroccan exchange student living with me, and he had explained that whole tradition to me.
Yeah, and I heard you use the phrase "lack of knowledge," and I think you're correct, but probably not in the context for what you're thinking, because people are explaining the paranormal from their general background to understand it. The thing about it though is that everybody in different cultures is all having these same experiences, but nobody's talking to each other. John Keel talked about this. I think it was time, space, and other unexplained phenomenon. But he was talking about like home invaders, like people that come into your house. He's like, literally everybody in the different camps is having experiences with people coming into their room and doing all these Zooms, but nobody's talking to each other, and nobody understands that we're all having these same things, but we're all calling them different things.
So I love Keel.
Yeah.
I personally think paranormal experiences and mental health go hand in hand.
Yep.
And I think that's a lot of the reason why people don't discuss it openly is because of the stigma. And then, it's easy to dismiss someone if you don't believe what they're saying.
So that's so true. Like we were at work one day, and I remember a patient.
Oh, I love this story.
That comes in, and he's going around, and he is losing his mind, and he's like, you guys don't understand. There's political elite that are meeting out in the woods in California before I charge $40. They're doing all these ceremonies, and everybody thinks that this is like an original delusion this guy has. And me and Vic are having to explain to him that he's talking about Bohemian Grove. Like this is not an original thing. This is.
I think we split up, and you explained to the staff that he wasn't necessarily making it up. And I went up to him, and I'm like, "Hey, man, I know what you're talking about. I know it's real. The thing is, I just can't have you running around screaming about it. I'll have a conversation with you about it, but we have to bring it way down.
You're scaring the normies."
I'm sure that actually brings a lot to the table working with mental health individuals, that you can actually sit down and discuss their legitimate thoughts that a doctor or say a normal nurse wouldn't want to. That's very interesting. Now, Bohemian Grove, that was the thing Alex Jones talks about quite a bit.
Oh yeah. That's probably where that's his big claim to fame that he come upon, and then kind of went downhill after that.
Go to Infowars.com, get your Inquisitive Minds t-shirt.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's fascinating. Now, there's a lot of people that have these experiences, but there's also a lot of people that make up these experiences.
Yeah.
Have you dealt with that as well?
Oh yeah.
How do you vet out these stories?
Well, we will often do this kind of before we take on any sort of case. We'll do an interview where we'll meet with the person on kind of a neutral ground area. Like we used to use Barnes and Noble a lot, where we'll go and we'll have a sit down interview with them. We'll record everything. We'll ask a lot of questions, and we'll go back in before we tell them if we take the case or not. We'll go through and analyze the tape recordings and listen to, was their story consistent? Does their story make sense? And also, are there signs of mental illness? Like we once had someone try to basically get us for a case, but what the guy was describing was, I'm abusing my girlfriend and I'm using the paranormal as an excuse. And like we were like, what you need to do is contact these people, and if you contact these people, go through the treatment, and you're still having issues with an entity, call us back. But we're not going to take this case until these issues are resolved.
Look, buddy, this ghost will not stop me from beating my wife. I don't know what's going on here.
That was the case.
So it was.
That's awful right there.
It was terrible.
Yeah.
We gave them as much information as we could on hotlines and stuff, and we slipped her a little extra information on like emergency contacts for like if you're mid assault and things like that. But they never did get back in touch with me. I really hope it worked out, but we weren't going to take a case that was basically just domestic abuse, because that's not what we do.
Another way too to kind of lead up to the generally people that have like legit experiences tend to be consistent with their stories. People that tend to be mentally ill, sometimes the stories will change dramatically over time, or things like that, or things will just become like those. Like people that have genuine stories, generally it tends to be kind of consistent, kind of thing like Bob Lazar, kind of like in his story, like it's just consistent over like 4 years.
Yeah, consistency is the key when it comes to these experiences, because when you genuinely experience them, it sticks with you. It's not something you forget the details of. It's almost like time stops and you're aware of everything. I'd like to take a minute before we move on to talk about our sponsor for the moment, Tenacious Detail. It is a automotive detailing company that will come to you. Get your car detailed in the comfort of your own home or office. And they are available in the Pittsburgh region, but they will travel as far as 3 hours away. And from what I understand, right now they're offering 10% off on all their interior services until the end of the month. Please reach out to them. That's Tenacious Detail at 724-498-9942. So how long have you guys known about shadow people personally? Like outside of, I knew you said you saw it when you were younger. How long before you had a grasp on it and a good research? Because I like to think of Slender Man as far as like creepypastas go, and I feel like he brought more to light of shadow people.
Let's see. I think I had my first actual shadow person encounter sometime around early college, late high school. And I then started diving heavy into the research on it. And I found a few videos, and I found the interview Art Bell had with, oh God, what was his name? Talks with Thunder, I believe was his name. And I think that was my first exposure to it. And I just kind of dove headlong into the research with it.
I'd say probably early 20s. Shortly after I met Vic, I probably became more aware of it as a phenomenon. And then I probably started researching it. I was, again, about 5-6-ish years ago, because that was our very first video. Like our very first video coming like as our YouTube channel was Shadow People. And
well, that's great.
Yeah, we dived super deep into it,
and it is bad.
It is a terrible video. Don't watch that video for entertain. Like information wise, it's fantastic. But like it's just done bad.
I don't know. I think we were so bad back then. It's actually legitimately entertaining.
I'm trying to be like the smoking guy from the X-Files, and Vic's leaning a little too much into his country word. Like it is like his cowboy talk.
We were trying to utilize reading voices when we started back in the day. So I leaned a lot on like that sort of accent my dad has instead of using my natural voice. And
couple videos later, we stopped doing that.
Oh yeah, it was a bad idea.
Yeah.
Well, that's a positive. Now, I've had people reach out and they've had a question about how to get rid of them. Now, obviously, you said they come from and feed almost on negative emotions or negative situations. Outside of removing yourself or clearing those situations up, how can someone get rid of them or no longer see them or just, you know what I mean, out of that situation?
No.
Don't use sage.
Really?
It will make them leave, and you're probably going to have 3 fine weeks to maybe a month and a half, and then they're going to come back and they're going to be super, super, super pissed, and the situation is going to be worse than it initially was. In almost all my experience, where someone has a significant shadow person problem and they use sage, that's how it almost always goes. I just don't think it is something that is a long-term fix, and it's something that it almost is like they become immune to it over time. So if you keep smudging, that time period between where they're gone just seems to drop and drop and drop, and it seems like by the time you run out of it, you're in a real situation.
They come back more intense.
Stop doing drugs. Sorry, that's short. For me, I always advise people to, it's a long-term thing. It's a long-term thing, and when you are people that are genuinely making choices in their lives that are genuinely for the better, and they're generally taking care of themselves and their immediate surroundings, and they're trying to make honesty better. In the long run, I think people see a lot more success with getting rid of shadow people. Like, we're talking about a real quick fix. I've seen a lot of people do things, clinging to something that brings you comfort. I've seen everything from like religious symbols to music. Like, all the way to like just something bare bones, like playing a song that they enjoy that makes them feel better. I've seen do it too.
Yeah, the only real long-term fix is really rooted in self-care, trying to work on those negative emotions. But if you need something that is going to get them away from you long enough for you to work on, I have had some success with a combination of Solomon seal root, sandalwood, a bit of sage, polished santo wood, and sorry, it's been a while since I've had to make this. Actually, that might have been about it.
Like, and I genuinely believe you have to feel these things actually work. Like, we had a case one time where we went to talk to this kind of like older lady, and she had like this. I mean, she was essentially describing some sort of like malevolent, like shadow person identity, and she had like this like little shrine thing going where she had like a Buddha, a cross, some quartz, and every other like generic, positive spiritual thing. But she didn't believe in any of them. She just thought they were just they're all generally good. So she just threw like everything at the wall to see what would stick, and obviously it wasn't working because I don't feel she had a whole lot of confidence in it.
No power behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we eventually sat down with her and it's like, what do you really, really believe in? And she ended up saying like Archangel Michael. So
Okay.
we're going to tailor this to you as much as we can. We drug into Agrippa's 3 Books of Occult Philosophy, which is a medieval grimoire. And we found all these symbols for Michael, and we kind of explained to her, hey, this is what it is. And do you feel like this is something that would make you feel safe? And our goal at that point was to remove her anxiety, to try to remove what this thing's seeking her out for.
Now, I haven't had a physical experience where it has hurt me, and I haven't heard of one necessarily, but can they get physically violent?
Oh yeah, actually, one of our in our very first video, we talk about this guy that reaches out to us talking about his trip to Waverly, which people report seeing shadow people there all the time. And
That's the abandoned asylum?
Yeah, in Louisville.
Okay.
And he had scratch marks like all over his back, his arms, I think, if I remember correctly, things like that. They tend to get more violent when they tend to have more pronounced features like clothing, glowing eyes, acts. That's when they usually ones that actually like cause physical harm have those characteristics.
But I think it's very limited in their capacity to cause physical harm to you. Like, I've never seen anything worse than very superficial scratches. Can you think of any case that has anything worse than that?
Maybe a slight shove.
Yeah.
Maybe, but I can't even remember the case on the top of my head. But it's scratches is predominant.
The mental scars are probably worse then.
Oh yeah, they're heavy hitters when it comes to emotional damage, not physical.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned a guy with a hat. A reoccurring story I've had from many people, and I've read quite a few instances, was about seeing a hat man, which I don't know if it's the same entity, but it seems like it's an ongoing source. Is a man with a like a long brimmed hat, almost like an old detective or something. Have you guys had any contact with a hat man, as I've been referred to it before?
I've seen ones that had hats before, but I don't think I've seen a hat man. And I know that sounds weird because there's usually certain traits that are more often associated with it. But I don't think I've ran into either a hat man or the hat man, however one chooses to put it.
I've had encounters with people too with hoods too, as well as a thing too. I've heard people talk a lot about Hatman being like the main shadow person. He's like the head guy. I've heard everything from that's just a very pronounced shadow person. I've heard those kinds of theories. I mean, generally though, Hatman encounters tend to be on the more extreme ends for encounters generally.
I have the house I grew up in was full of the paranormal. I grew up in a family that they weren't investigators, but they were kind of like understanding, like, yeah, it happens, ghosts are real type thing. And in my dining room in the house growing up, there was a hat man, but he was more of a residual haunting. Like, I would just see him and he had a direct path he would go to, and that's it. There was never like any interaction with me or anything. But my late wife, one day, this conversation came up, and she broke down crying because apparently she would have nightmares with this same vision that I described and would leave her paralyzed in her sleep. Now, you guys are also, you said paranormal investigators. Can you tell me, I don't know, an interesting story about that? What was your most active investigation?
So, sorry, man, we lost you during part of that. Well, can you repeat that?
Yeah, what part did you catch? I'll just say it again. Growing up in my house, in the dining room, there was a hat man, but it was a residual haunting. He would never interact with me, but I would just see him take a specific path and then essentially walk into the wall. Now, I was having this conversation with my late wife, and she eventually broke down and cried about it because she was having nightmares about the man I described, and she would get sleep paralysis from it. I still got you there, guys?
Yeah, you still got it. Sorry. What was the question about our investigation?
Oh, can you describe a more active investigation that you've been through? Because I'm sure there's quite a few investigations where it's almost run of the mill.
I know a good one. It even goes into our topic of shadow people. We were working with a family that was basically under assault by shadow people, and they were seeing them a lot, really commonly in the yard. But then there was one that was very aggressive and commonly in the house. They had just recently had a baby, and they were very worried about it because of that, because it would often seem to focus around the baby. Like they would usually see it kind of hovering over the baby, staring at the baby, things like that. So they brought us in to assist with this situation. And this was a large family all living in one house. And as we're going through the interviews, we kind of realized one of the sisters was clearly kind of dancing around the subject and holding something back. And we pressed her later outside of the house by herself, and she's like, no, I know what this entity is. The rest of the family isn't involved with it, but I know this entity. We were lovers in a past life. He had me carve his name out here, and it was basically a to-do list of what not to do in the paranormal, of all the things that she's doing. She had like a little altar set up for him out in the woods. And I'm like, man, no wonder this is like
Getting worse.
a really aggressive shadow person. He's getting all the attention and all this stuff. And she's like, he comes to me in my dreams, and whoo,
That's wild.
That was a very difficult case.
Now, was she receptive to like taking the altar down and stop feeding into it? Was she looking for a solution?
No, because she believed that this was a past lover who had come back to her. And we'd always try to rationalize with her. I'm like, okay, if this is a past lover that's come back to you, why do you feel like your lover is fixated on the child in the house? And things like that, trying to kind of lead her to that conclusion of this is probably something attempting to deceive you, not something that is like, we're basically trying to get her to the point of understanding these things aren't above lying to you to get what they want. And it was a struggle. We met with her personally, I think 3 or 4 times, trying to get her to that area. Eventually, she stopped communicating with us, and she ended up leaving the house on her own because she felt that the rest of the family felt we needed to go ahead with either some form of cleansing or give them some advice to get rid of it. She's like, I'm not having any of this, and she ends up moving out of the house before. Like this was probably an 8-month case that we were on. And it was a long. I can tell you a lot of stories about that case actually, because like I said, it was very drawn out.
You know, when you guys go on a case, is there an end goal in mind, or are you just investigating just to find out what it is?
Well, there's the end goal of getting the family to an area where they can go on with their normal life. We've had people asking us to stop early because they decided this is something they are choosing to live with. I never really personally think that that's a good idea, but I accept, what they say. But ultimately, it's to restore enough normalcy that they are comfortable again.
You mentioned a cleanse. That's something you guys do? Is there a certain process you could give advice to the listeners?
Not as much anymore. Like this was something that we mainly were doing several years ago. Our team was a little different back then. It's something that like I know I had done before, Adam has done before. Most often we try to like the self-care route is the better long-term route. It seems like once you build yourself up, build up that confidence and stuff, a lot of these things that are trying to menace you seem to lose a lot of their interest. So we prefer to go that route, but when we cleanse, it's more to try to buy the family some time, get a few good nights of sleep so they can then focus on the self-care.
Now, go ahead.
And as far as advice, don't just use sage. A lot of people go to that as a mainstay, but I've heard so many stories about someone saging an area and then the entity just coming back sometime later and just being extra pissed off.
Now, you mentioned that with that last case, the lady, you told her they're not above lying to you to get what they want. Are there a lot of instances where it's not necessarily a shadow person, but a different entity just appearing as that?
Where it might be something else other than a shadow person?
Yes. It just may be displaying itself as a shadow person.
Oh, yeah.
In that case, she thought it was a vampire that could only manifest as a shadow person at this point. Like I said, that case was a ride. It was a long ride. But she felt
this is getting more interesting as it goes on.
Yeah. And I mean, we've had a couple cases in which it initially sounded like a shadow person at first, but then the couple started talking about it like possessing one of the people, believing that it like resided inside of the person, and they genuinely thought it was a demon, which that is not what we deal with. If someone genuinely believes that they have a demon possession going on, we're like, you need to contact Catholic Church. Have a good one.
Yeah,
here's resources. Go ahead.
So you guys don't deal with demons at all?
No, if you look at like the history of exorcism, if we think it's legitimately a demon, successful exorcisms are extremely difficult and require very specific training. And truthfully, it's a very, very intense process when it comes to, like, if it is a legit demon. More often we'll encounter people who think it's a demon and it's actually more often a shadow person. But if we think it's a real demon, we don't get involved with it because we're not properly trained for that situation.
And in those types of situations, you're generally going to see a much more extreme effect that it has on the person. Like you'll see like extreme like weight loss, it literally destroying the person's life, knowledge of the unknown, things like that. You'll see far more extreme traits than that. That's why we generally, would you say we've ever actually generally, I don't think I've ever actually believed that we've encountered something.
I personally do not believe I have ever encountered a demon, nor do I believe I've been called on a case where I thought it legitimately was a demon.
Now, I'm sorry to jump around here a bit, but I can't gloss over. You said she thought it was a vampire?
Yes, she thought it was a vampire that had loved her in a past life whose spirit has now returned to her to rekindle love in her new life.
Wow.
They said it was a ride.
Yeah.
I guess the easiest question would be, what are your guys' stance on vampires then?
Vampire. Okay.
I personally do not put it outside a possible realm, especially if we're going back to early folklore where we're extending the word vampire to things like strigoi, revenants, things like that. I think something along those lines did occur at a certain time in our past and perhaps could still occur. But I also think that the stories that we have are very watered down. I don't think it's going to be like Twilight situation.
Yeah. I think the energy vampires, and I'm using air quotes here, like where people like absorb auras from people or their energy is a totally different thing. Because I'm telling you, there are people that just drain you, and I don't really think that's a supernatural thing. I just think that's just a trait that just people can just turn up to 11, and they can just suck your energy because that's just a thing.
Okay, that's fair enough. That's not something I've ever really thought about with vampires. I wouldn't say it's impossible because all the stuff I talk about, it's just not something I've heard anyone ever say they've had an encounter with.
We had in Indiana. There's a story involving like a hotel where a vampire stayed. We actually have one of those here. Here actually in Indiana. We actually had one of those like way back. Mm-hmm.
Now,
these did they have a vampire room?
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Oh, they had a vampire room you could stay in.
Well, no, you couldn't stay in there. But as the legend goes, this mysterious individual, and I'm sorry, I don't know the dates because I didn't prep for this story, but this mysterious individual had arrived there, rented a place for a prolonged stay, and insisted that though they had to build a room for him in the basement, there could not be any natural sunlight. The per individual was never spotted during the day, had an extremely pale complexion, and at least supposedly had requested blood or had been witnessed drinking blood. Kind of depends on the source that you're looking at for the story. And I had this was a long time ago. I had a girlfriend that used to work at the hotel, and she snuck me down into the basement. And sure enough, there's still like this partial room set up in the basement. So it at least seemed to me that there may have been some truth to the story.
With those types of stories, sometimes it seems like they were just people who were a little bit deranged, a little bit off kilter.
Here. Yeah. Because we deal with a lot of people that are just legit paranoid and they just want to have like their room set up in a specific way that they feel that they need. And I mean, we're going to be accommodating, So I think those kind of people.
I think it was Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, who drank blood and whatnot from animals. He would kill rabbits and drink their blood. Like he was convinced that I believe, and I may be misquoted, but he was convinced like the government was stealing his blood, so he was killing all these animals. And then when he would kill people, he would drink some of their blood as well. And he was just a deranged individual.
Oh yeah, like deranged. You can point out a lot of people throughout history that have been deranged individuals with a blood drinking obsession or a blood bathing obsession. Like for example, I don't personally believe that Elizabeth Bathory is associated with vampirism, but I do believe that she was very obsessed with bathing in blood. I think this was just a preoccupation she had. What is it?
Vlad Dracul that the modern day vampires inspired after?
Well, he's a fascinating character altogether. Like, if you ever get a chance to read a detailed history of his life, he has a very peculiar story. I don't necessarily know anything in his story that makes me think the man had to be supernatural. I just think he's a man that would do anything, literally anything, to save his country, including killing a ton of his countrymen.
I agree with that.
I said that there seemed to have been some truth to the vampire story in French Lick. I mean, there's at least some truth that someone had requested the room. I don't think he's legitimately a vampire.
Yeah, I see. That's wild to me, and I think even if, like you said, these types of things did exist at one point, we romanticize many creatures, many beings that to the point where they're not even what they would look like originally before.
Oh no! Early vampires, God, they are ugly as hell. Like Strigoi are like these half-rotting, pseudo-bestial, pseudo-human revenants running around, and they're not going to come up and look into your eye and try to seduce you. They're going to come up to you and rip off your face.
That's my biggest qualm with modern day lore, is that it's so romanticized. Like, I know everyone always talks about wanting a zombie apocalypse so they could just go haywire. Honestly, that would terrify me, and I would take myself out instantly because I couldn't deal with that.
But something that kind of like bothers me as a paranormal researcher too. Like, if you look at like how many paranormal entities act, there's this need they seem to have with wanting attention, from a person and things like that. And as time progresses, we as a culture, we seem to need validation much more. Like, if you look at the modern phenomenon of social media, and every time you post anything, there's a number of likes. We just need to feel validated. So many times, like, you see these encounters of people having these encounters with these paranormal entities, and people think they're special because they're having these things, and they give more attention to it so they can continue to feel special. And sometimes it feeds this toxic cycle that seems to happen in the paranormal.
It's almost like you could call Kim Kardashian a modern day vampire then.
Oh, yeah.
Now, you mentioned these shadow people could be interdimensional. Is there any other thoughts, their origin or how they manifest? And to add on that, since they feed off the negative energy, could they just be a manifestation of your negative energy?
I mean, it's certainly possible. Yeah. The problem is when it comes to the question of exactly what they are, exactly where they're from, we're left mainly with speculation because there's just not a whole lot of detail of like from the encounters that would lead to it, because conversations with shadow people are exceedingly rare.
So a lot of times it's just left to people to interpret their intentions from their own personal experience with the paranormal, and that's why I have all these explanations of them being demons, ghosts, omens of death, things like that.
And the few times I have found encounters where there was communication, I've never heard of anything where I thought they were at all doing anything except for telling the person what they needed to hear to try to basically comply with what they wanted.
They were honeypotting them.
Yeah.
Huh. Fellas, I tell you what. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I tell you what, I usually like to keep my podcast to about an hour, and time has just flown by with you gentlemen.
You got to get us back for a second episode then.
Yeah, I would love to have you back on in the future. Before I say anything else, though, promo time, fellas. Where can the people find you?
Absolutely. So if you guys like what we say, you guys want to hear more about us, you guys can go over to YouTube. One Candle Society is the word One Candle Society. You can find us there, and all of our videos are all on there. Our whole podcast is up there as well too. We upload it up there. If you want to check out our podcast, you guys can check us out on any platform where you guys get podcasts. We're on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, all those fun places like that. That's where you guys can check out all of our content.
A little bit of inside baseball here. How'd you guys get on Stitcher? Because I'm on almost everywhere but there.
I think from our host server. I think our host server had the ability for us to go over to their site. If I'm correct, if I remember, we had uploaded a lot of them. I can try to send you something to show you and help you out. That's no problem.
Yeah, that'd be great. Well, I want to remind the people that Breast Cancer Awareness Month is in October, and I've designed a shirt and decided to donate 100% of the profits to the Breast Cancer Research Foundation. If you want to learn more about them, their website is bcrf.org. And my shirt, the link will be in the description here. It's at Teespring, and it's just a Inquisitive Mind shirt. It's pink. It's got their website on the back. And breast cancer is a very important issue for me. My mother was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer when I was 17, and she fought like hell and made it through that. Excuse me, I get a little choked up. And she was on a pill that would keep her breast cancer in remission, but a side effect of that pill was that it caused ovarian cancer. And she not only had a double mastectomy, she ended up getting a full hysterectomy. And she's good today. She's alive and well today. But there's many women out there that are still struggling. There's many people that are struggling, because I don't want you to think that it's just a female issue. Men can get breast cancer too. So this organization not only brings light, they're working for a cure. I believe they also donate wigs to women who lose their hair, which is more important than people realize. I remember when my mother was losing her hair, we went to the barbershop and she got her head shaved, and she was strong, and I was in the chair crying watching that happen. And the only thing I could think to do was shave my head for my mother. Anyways, I'm getting off topic here. What I'm saying is, go to their website, donate to them, or buy a shirt, whatever. It's a great organization. Breast cancer is still a huge issue in the world right now, and it's really important to me. Outside of that, I also have a Halloween design up in the shirt, an Inquisitive Minds podcast shirt. Check it out there. Other than that, fellas, I'm going to say boom bop. That's it for the episode today. Thank you guys so much for coming on. Check out One Candle Society. They are doing great things. You can catch us anywhere you stream your platforms, anywhere you stream your podcasts outside of Stitcher, like I mentioned, or you can check us out at inquisitiveminds.com. That's INQUIZATIVE minds.com, spelled a little bit differently. And stay curious, guys.